Hi there, Steve Rubis, the Fix It IRO. It's been a while since we've done a video. Had some things cooking, so we're back. And today we want to talk about the Ferris Bueller problem of investor relations. So let's start with a very quick comment. As an IRO or a company, if you're not saying it, you should assume that investors A, do not believe it, B, do not understand it, and C, do not know about it. And I think this comment really kind of sets the framework for this Ferris Bueller problem that we want to walk through. So I'm sure everybody in the audience has seen the movie Ferris Bueller's Day Off, knows the scene where Ben Stein is Bueller, Bueller, Bueller. Well, the Ferris Bueller problem for investor relations is the idea that your website or your investor materials really fail to convey the position or station that your company has in its corporate life. And really what it shows is you're not really interested in engaging with investors. So the common characteristics of the Ferris Bueller investor relations problem can really be summarized by running an IR program that really does not facilitate frictionless engagement, meaning that either the website's old, your summary landing page is awful, you don't have an investor deck, your earnings disclosures are poor, meaning that you don't provide a supplement or an earnings slide deck that provides the pictorial view of your financial KPIs over time. And another one is you don't have a defined competitor set. When you don't have a defined competitor set, we talked about this in one of our earlier videos, it opens you up to a short attack. It also shows that you're not in control of your own business. When I was an analyst, one of the most important things I would analyze when I was initiating on a company was the competitive section or a competitor section in your 10K or 20F. And that it allowed me to better understand who the industry was, where your company was positioned. I could figure out if there were companies I needed to track as possible IPOs. And it just made me smarter about your business. And if you can lay out that framework for investors, you get a lot of points for being a very smart company. Additionally, from the competitor standpoint, if you're not laying out your competitors, you're not letting investors build a sum of the parts analysis. Sometimes if your business is complex and has multiple lines of business, you need to provide the right information so that an investor can build a sum of the parts valuation. And it'll help you. If you don't provide the data, they may pick incorrect companies or just willy-nilly pick a company as to use as a comp, and it can throw off the entire valuation process. Next, it's the lack of a defined total addressable market. We ran into this at DFT, in that investors always need to know what are the guardrails or ranges of what the company is playing for in terms of a market. Where TAM goes awry is in the case of healthcare IT, where investors started valuing Athena Health or Medidata Solutions on a penetration of the TAM. That's a little bit wonky from a valuation perspective. I wouldn't advocate that, but I think it's important for you to provide enough information for an investor to figure out that, okay, this is the TAM. Can I go back, recreate the TAM that you're talking about and understand the components that drive that TAM and believe it? And this was one of the most compelling things that I created when I was an IRO at DFT, where I was able to really lay out the guideposts for what the megawatt opportunity was for the hyperscale players and the 7 or 8 others who are like the hyperscale players. Next is the idea of lack of defined financial metrics. This is where we really get back to the comment at the beginning of the video of the idea that if you're not saying it, no one believes it, understands it, or knows it. And to take it a step further, every public company has a golden metric. Even a private company has a golden metric. And this golden metric is something that if you perform well on or perform poorly on, you're going to see an outsized move in the stock. Now, the struggle is that if you're a public company and you have a golden metric, the problem is you can never perform poorly on that golden metric or you're going to have problems with your stock. And secondly, you always need to be reporting and updating investors on your performance around that golden metric. At DFT and data center REITs, it was all about leasing. You needed to show that you were doing some sort of leasing every quarter. If you were putting a bagel up on the board, you were in trouble. So the idea of golden metrics, they can be created by management very easily, and it happens most often at an analyst day. Once the CFO or CEO or company anchors an investor to a number, that is a golden metric. For example, with Medidata Solutions, every year at their analyst day, when I covered the company, they would be targeting 20 to 25% top line growth. Well, that became a golden metric, meaning that every quarter subsequent to that analyst day, investors would focus on, is the company going to grow 20% or not this year? If the expectations were such that the stock or the company was going to grow 18%, the stock was going to take a hit regardless of how good the business prospects were. Secondly, if you're not, at an investor day, if you throw a metric out there of adjusted EBITDA margin expansion targets or unlevered free cash flow margin profile, those are now golden metrics. Those are metrics that you're using to anchor investor expectations, and you need to provide updates on those on every quarterly call until you do a new investor day and decide to change your targets or update those targets. So let's look at an example here to talk about the Ferris Bueller problem. And I think the best one right now is Chipotle Mexican Grill. Chipotle Mexican Grill is in the market for a director of investor relations. I'm not going to be that person because they've already rejected my application, but I think it's instructive of what is wrong when you have a company that has really great stature and should be a darling in its industry, but is doing the bare minimum in terms of investor relations. So, CMG, Chipotle Mexican Grill, is one of the best franchises in the restaurant space. It's a $12 billion company, has the best unit growth, best same-store sales growth, but you wouldn't know that if you went to the investor relations website. You'd have no idea what they really do. They have a very wonky corporate profile that you have to click on, and then is a two-page essay that really has no call to action for investors. And on top of that, you throw in the health scares that the company faced over the last several years. They have a lot of heavy lifting to do. This is a company that should be viewed as a FANG stock in my view, meaning that it has several of the same characteristics of a Facebook or Amazon or Google or Netflix, and that it's driven by a millennial cult following, and the growth metrics are out of this world relative to its competitors. Yes, it's not a tech stock, but it's as close as you get to a FANG stock for not being technology. And the problem is that their website and their investor presence is more like a microcap biotech company. And this is where the heart of the matter comes in, is that let's start by talking about their website and presence first, then we'll talk about how we can correct it. So, the Chipotle Mexican Grill website consists of a very basic landing page. It's got news flow, stock price, corporate profile, great backbone, meaning you can click and get to where you want to very quickly, but you're missing the important investor materials. You don't have an investor thesis or call to action. You don't have the key financial concepts that an investor needs to know about the company, a bulky corporate profile, lack of shortcuts to key materials like your 10K or your investor deck. They don't have an investor deck, so they don't have an MVP slide. And then there's no earnings supplement or earnings slide deck. So essentially, you've got a company here that should be a no-brainer investment for a lot of people, even with the health food scare, and they're not doing enough to convince the street that, hey, we are the leaders in the industry. So what do they need to do better? They need to come up with an investor thesis that shows, a thesis or a call to action to own the stock. If you're someone like me who doesn't have a restaurant background and I come to the website, I have no idea why I should own Chipotle. And the corporate profile that's there is not doing enough to tell me, hey, I need to own this stock. Ultimately, in investor relations, you have to do more to get people engaged. It's not a passive endeavor, even though that's what most people seem to think it is. Second, add key high-level metrics. For example, CMG operates in X markets, in X states, and owns X restaurants. And the idea that we plan to add X to X restaurants in a given year, and the idea that our growth metrics on a same-store basis or unit growth are this in the last quarter, that gets people excited and gets them to keep digging deeper. Again, simplify the corporate profile. It's too much like a 10-paragraph essay. It needs to be a couple of bullet points. Boom. Number 4, add shortcuts. I need to be able to get to my 10K or my investor deck immediately from the homepage. You want to call attention to the documents that you want people to read and digest. So the investor deck, they don't have one. I mean, I think the biggest mistake a company can make is not having an investor deck. The investor deck sets the baseline for all investors that come to your company. They learn what you do, what your key aspects are immediately, and they'll start asking you better questions in meetings versus how many restaurants do you own. And a corollary to that is they need an MVP slide. And I think competitive benchmarking is the MVP slide for most every public company that exists. It allows you to call out the most important pieces of data around your company and highlight why you're better than your competition on those key data points. It's important. People don't do it. They need to do it. And then finally, the earnings release, it would be better if they could provide some greater detail in terms of disclosures or an earnings supplement or an earnings deck. So essentially, I think that CMG really highlights an issue with, with companies, beyond Chipotle Mexican Grill. The idea that most companies are not doing enough to provide the necessary investor materials to provide a frictionless engagement process. And the rule of thumb is the smaller you are, the more work you have to do. Or if you have issues going on with your business, the more work you have to do to get investors to care and convince them that your position is the right position and the leading position. Too many IROs complain that, it's hard to engage investors. It's hard to get an investor into my stock. I'm only a $100 million company. I would argue if you're not looking at, is my investor deck optimized? Am I providing the right financial metrics for investors to get excited on my website? Am I providing an MVP slide in my investor deck? If I'm not doing these things, then that's why your engagement is difficult. You're not doing your job. You need to be evangelizing your company if you're an IRO. It's all about you. It's not about the investor. The problem begins and ends with the IRO, period. And so, again, I think to summarize everything here, I think that if you take a look in the mirror and really analyze what you're putting out there as an IR program, you can do a lot to supercharge your engagement. And if you're a strong company, make it even stronger. And if you're a weak or irrelevant microcap, if you do as much or try to mimic what a mega cap company does, I guarantee you're going to get better engagement among your investors. So with that, thanks for watching. I know it's been a while. There'll be some more here over the next few days. Please contact us if you know of IR opportunities or think that I can help a company. I would really appreciate it. And if we work with you at Rafficchio Investor Relations, we think your stock is worth more money. Thank you.